Welcome, listeners and viewers, to another very special episode of our Season 7 80s horror theme. So for today, we are doing yet another Versus episode. We did one last season with the spiders infected versus Sting.
Yep.
And of course, if you go all the way back to our second season, we did a whole season of original versus remake. So we wanted to formalize this process a little bit more. So we've actually created categories, and we're going to score these two films based on the different categories. So we are tackling Werewolves today. Two iconic, probably maybe two of the more notable werewolf films of all time.
Yeah, unless you go back to the Universal originals.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Because I think we've both bemoaned the fact that the werewolf subgenre is a little shallow.
Yeah, it is.
And 2025 is not helping at all with Wolfman, which was disappointing by both of our accounts. So if you know your 80s horror and you know werewolves, then you could probably guess that the two werewolf films we are showing down today are The Howling and
American Werewolf in London.
American Werewolf in London. So our categories for comparison will be, firstly, story and theme. Secondly, practical effects, but in this case, I think we're going to focus especially on werewolf transformations, which is the highlight of practical effects for these films. Tone, atmosphere, and scares is our third category. Our fourth category is going to be characters. Fifth category is music. And then finally, we're going to have the ending or the payoff for the film. So 6 categories, Showdown, Howling versus American Werewolf. And in the end, we'll see which one reigns supreme.
There can be only one.
There can be only one. You're not wearing your Versus shirt today.
No. Well, we've given enough attention to Nick Cage, so.
And between the two of us, neither one of us had a werewolf shirt.
I can't even find a werewolf shirt, so help us out, people.
Yeah, we'll have to work on that.
Yeah.
All right, so as this is a slightly different format today, we will not have our regular quick cuts. And also, I think it's going to be impossible to avoid spoilers. So you have been warned. We will have full spoilers for both The Howling and American Werewolf in London. So if you've not seen these films, or you've only seen one but not seen the other, I think in both cases, you'd want to go watch them first.
I think so too. Yeah, and this is like spoilers right from the beginning. There's no way you can talk about these films without spoiling everything. So
yeah, and normally we kind of, because we're going through these categories, it's going to be unavoidable.
True.
Anything you want to add before we start?
No, I don't think so.
Actually, I think it's worth just to give our biases and contextualize our experiences with these films. Do you want to speak to what is your experience with these two films before we start?
I saw both of these films when I was in high school as rentals. The Howling, I liked because, 1980, this was a big deal. And then a year later, American Werewolf comes out, and that was probably one of my favorite horror movies for a long, long time.
Oh, cool.
I would watch this every week.
Every week?
Yeah. I'm saying I could watch it every week.
Oh, sure.
I didn't do it every week, but
right.
Yeah, I love this film. Partly because I had a crush on one of the characters, but other than that, there you go.
Okay. So for me, I saw neither of these films as a child.
What? That's shocking.
I know, right? This is my 80s blind spot. I did see American Werewolf in London in university with a couple of friends who recommended it. So I have seen that one before. But at that stage, that was past that formative years, nostalgic kind of churning era. So I don't have that attachment to American Werewolf in London, but I did see it before. The Howling, I had not seen until I prepared for this episode. So I watched it for the first time 2 weeks ago.
There you go.
So that's my bias coming in for these two films, and we have yours as well. All right, so I'm going to introduce The Howling. Leatherface is going to introduce American Werewolf, and then we'll start our official comparisons. So The Howling is a 1981 horror film directed by Joe Dante, who is known for directing The Gremlins and Piranha. The story follows television journalist Karen White, played by Dee Wallace, who, after a traumatic encounter with a serial killer, retreats to a secluded rehabilitation center, The Colony. There, she discovers that the residents are not what they seem, uncovering a terrifying secret. So the main cast, as I mentioned, Dee Wallace as Karen White, Patrick McNee as George Wagner. Is it Wagner? Wagner?
I think it's Wagner.
Yeah, Wagner. Robert Picardo as Eddie the Strangler, and Dennis Dugan as Chris. The Howling has a 6.6 on Internet Movie Database, and a 74% critic rating, and a 60% audience score.
Died in an attempted assault of KDHB anchorwoman Karen White.
There's this blood on me, and I can't imagine who it might have come from.
I'm going to recommend that you go out to the colony for a week or two.
I was here this morning.
God, look at the door. Bill just got bitten by a wolf.
American Werewolf, 1981. It's an hour and 37. I would class this as a horror black comedy, rated R. When it first came out. IMDb 7.5 and Rotten Tomatoes 89 and 85 critic and audience respectively. So this was directed by John Landis, Animal House, Twilight Zone, Blues Brothers, Trading Places, Coming to America, and Michael Jackson's Thriller video. The cast is David Naughton, who plays David. Jenny, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Agutter, I think. Agutter. Agutter.
Yeah, Agater.
Agater?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. As Nurse Price, who I had a major crush on.
I can see that.
Griffin Dunn is Jack, and John Woodvine is Dr. Hirsch. Special effects by Rick Baker. And this was the first movie to win a special effects award, makeup award.
Yeah, they made it for
Academy. For this film. Yeah. So American college students David Kessler and Jack Goodman are on a walking tour of Britain, and they're attacked by a werewolf that none of the locals will admit exists. Jack dies, and David recovers in hospital where he has nightmares.
La 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 la. Isn't this fun? Lovely stroll on the moors. Did you hear that? I heard that. What is it? You think it's a dog? Nice doggy. Good boy.
What happened to them?
Well, the police report said they were attacked by an escaped lunatic.
A wolf. My friend Jack was just here. Told me that I will become a monster in 2 days.
Your dead friend, Jack.
Yes.
All right, well, here we go. So, The Howling versus American Werewolf in London. All right, so our first category is story and themes. What are your thoughts on that?
For my bet, the American Werewolf wins out because I found some of the stuff in The Howling a little bit problematic for me in terms of story. The whole thing out at the colony, which didn't surprise me because starting in the late 70s, it was the rise of the self-help movement. And anyway, but that side of things, going out to the colony and all the rest of it, that didn't work for me.
Okay. See, I would give this one to The Howling because I find the storyline of American Werewolf in London just to be very simple.
Yeah.
Essentially, you just have these two guys. One of them is bit, and it's just the story of him becoming a werewolf. Whereas I felt like The Howling has more of a rich background. So you have the serial killer, you have the, I guess she's like undercover, and you have the media element. So there's just more going on. It had sort of a procedural, there's some mystery. You're trying to figure out what's going on. It does have the colony thing. So I just felt like it was more rich. There's more going on beyond just, here's a story about a guy becoming a werewolf. This wasn't your traditional werewolf setup. So it almost it could have been a normal film based on all the other elements because you have mystery, you have the detective, you have the cult place, you have the characters. Granted, we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But I guess in terms of story and themes, there's maybe a bit more thematically going on as well. They seem to be talking about like lust and, werewolves maybe being a metaphor for the dangers of that. There's, I think, a lot about like news media and people's reaction to news media. I felt like there was maybe more going on beyond just telling a werewolf story.
And I won't argue with that, but that's part of my problem with it. There's too much going on.
Okay. So it was overly complicated?
Well, I mean, it's not exactly a complicated story, but in my mind, they're trying to do too much. Like, I think having the media part of it, I liked. It was one of my positives. I liked how they started in the TV studio but they were just, I don't know how much we want to get into details, but like I found the whole thing with her and the serial killer, it was completely unbelievable that they would put an anchor woman in that situation. In that situation. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So there are elements of it that I would agree with. I think, and it's funny because we're coming at it from basically the same place. I think American Werewolf is better because it's a simpler story.
Yes.
And so,
because I thought that was such a unique setup, kind of, because I wasn't expecting to have those angles in The Howling. So the idea that she's going in and luring a serial killer, and it's this strangler, but at the beginning you have no idea that he's a werewolf, and she's meeting him in that booth. Like it just had those extra elements beyond just, oh, this is a werewolf story.
Yeah, and I like the beginning. I think it starts stronger than it ends. We'll talk about the ending.
We will. And I think I'll agree with you. I do hear what you're saying, but just in terms of, first story, I'm going to give it to Howling, but it sounds like you're giving it to American Werewolf.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to give points. So we're going to have 1 point to American Werewolf in London and 1 point to Howling.
There you go.
For story and themes. It sounds like you strongly disagree. Okay, so moving on to... I wonder, okay, should we jump right into practical effects now, or should we say that one?
Yeah, why not?
All right. So practical effects, but in this case, I think we're mostly looking at the transformations.
I think so, yeah.
And this is kind of an unfair fight, I would say. But
isn't this Rick Baker as well, though, in Howling, and Rick Bottin?
Well, Rob Bottin.
Rob Bottin, yeah.
So apparently what I had read is that Rick Baker was originally slated to do the makeup for the Howling, and he started the process, but then he handed it over to Rob Bottin. So then he mostly was mostly associated with American Werewolf in London. And then Rob Bottin, of course, went on to do makeup for The Thing, which has amazing practical effects. So they definitely did well, but I think the thing that's synonymous with American Werewolf in London and the reason that everyone loves it so much is for that iconic transformation scene.
Yeah, and the interesting thing if you look at both transformation scenes side by side, I mean, one of the things I was listening to a little interview with Rick Baker, and he talked about the idea of John Landis was very specific that he wanted a quadrupedal. He didn't want a bipedal wolfman, werewolf. And so I think that was one of the things that made it better for me was he was looking at dog skeletons versus human skeletons. And so he was looking at it from a skeletal point of view. That's why you see like the hands get longer and the feet get longer. The special effects were still good in The Howling, very similar in the sense of the snout growing in, and they're using the same material. I forget, it's some kind of urethane rubber kind of thing. And they've got probably, what do they call those? Like blister bags, or what do they call those bladders, air bladders to make things move.
Because in The Howling, it's more of that bubbling effect, whereas in American Werewolf, it's more that like elongating of like feet and hands and limbs and snout. And it's interesting because American Werewolf in London, it feels like it sounds like it's a very painful process. Whereas in The Howling, he almost seems to be like reveling in it or enjoy. You don't get that same pain association.
I mean, the difference may be that, and I agree with you 100% because there doesn't seem to be the same discomfort. That was another thing that John Landis said, like, if you think about this, that's not going to be a fun ride. So let's make it, look uncomfortable and painful. But the thing that I was thinking about is, well, if he's a serial killer anyway, maybe he's getting off on that aspect of it. Like maybe he's a bit of a masochist, but definitely it didn't seem as painful for sure.
So it's interesting. Like I think, just spoiler, I will say that I think American Werewolf in London has the better transformation. But I kind of like the bipedal look of the werewolves in The Howling. So once they've transformed, I actually think I prefer the look of the werewolves in The Howling. And I found the four-legged ones to look almost a little goofy. But there's no doubt that transformation when he goes from human to werewolf is very impressive. And for both of them, like that was 40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. No CGI.
And that's where CGI is often so bad, and why practicals are king is that they do hold up.
Yeah. Even though I totally hear what you're saying about the movement of the werewolf is a little bit stilted, a little bit wooden. Like it's not as fluid as a four-legged animal would move. But it's not CGI. Like you're looking at a animatronics or whatever they did for that. So I guess if you just look at the transformation scene, I think it's just better placed in the film. Like The Howling seems, it's almost like an afterthought. Like it's there in the office and things are happening. Mm-hmm. Whereas that's in American Werewolf, that's like the centerpiece of the film.
It is for sure. Yeah. Which I wonder if it seemed like The Howling actually had to do more transformations
Yes.
So maybe they had to spread their resources out a little bit more, whereas like that one scene, they can just go all in.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one of the positives that I had for American Werewolf was, they John Landis had been around for a long time already, but he certainly learned the lesson from Steven Spielberg. You don't have to show; you can just suggest.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, because when the two guys are first attacked on the moor, you don't see anything. It's fast, cuts, and then later, when there's a werewolf and David has a dream, and he's turned into the werewolf, but you don't actually see him. Even in the one scene in the train station, you see a paw.
That's right.
A leg, but you don't see the werewolf. So they've got the transformation scene, and then they save the big reveal really for the very end, the very finale.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say, it's funny you mentioned the Thriller music video.
Yeah.
So I guess Rick Baker did the Michael Jackson Weird Cat effect as well, which is kind of funny. What was the other thing I was gonna say? Shoot. Okay, I forget now. That's okay. All right.
So
anything else?
American Werewolf gets an extra point there.
For sure, yeah. So even in this case, though I acknowledge the good things about The Howling, I had a point I really wanted to make and I forget. That's okay. I think the fact that it won the Oscar and that the reason everyone points to American Werewolf as being such an important film is for the transformation. So we'll give 2 points for American Werewolf on makeup and practical effects and 1 for The Howling. Right. Yeah, apparently The Howling actually ran out of budget.
Oh, wow.
So the final transformation scene, they had to really focus on close-ups and they had to make some shortcuts because they just ran out of budget for it. So yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The thing I didn't like about The Howling, the first transformation after the romance scene, it almost looks like animation, like a cartoon.
Yes.
That looked pretty bad and that did not age well. And that really took me out of it. So I think there's definitely nothing that took me out of it for American Werewolf.
There you go.
All right. So next category. Tone and atmosphere or scares.
Okay. Well, so I would start off by saying American Werewolf is not a scary film.
No.
It leans more to the black comedy than to the horror. So for scares, I would have to give it to Howling, in terms of a scarier quote unquote film. Having said that, there are some pretty horrific scenes in American Werewolf. I can remember now. For me, it's not quite as drastic as it was, but when I first saw this, and there's the nightmare scene with his family, that absolutely blew me out of the chair.
Interesting.
That really threw me for a loop.
Like the werewolf, the Nazi werewolves?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I think it was because of the violence of the scene. It wasn't scary, but it was just full on violence.
That's true.
And that kind of threw me because the tone of that really doesn't match the rest of the film.
No, to me, that scene almost detracted a little bit because what are Nazi werewolves? It seems so out of place that I feel like tonally American Werewolf maybe, do you think it does itself a disservice? Do you think it would have been better to just go all in horror and not play with the comedy thing?
Ooh, I'm pretty biased.
Because when you look at his filmography, it's almost all comedies.
Yeah. Well, see, I think it really works in American Werewolf. Mm-hmm. It works for me because Griffin Dunn and David Naughton. David Naughton had done some television, sitcom kind of stuff, and just their personalities, I think, come off as a little bit. It's not like they're comedians, but their quips, their sarcasm comes off as funny. So to me, that works in with the black comedy.
Yeah.
So for me, no, I like the mix. I don't think it's a horror film other than the fact that there's that great transformation, but I like the black comedy.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's a more accessible film. I could see anyone watching and enjoying American Werewolf in London. I watched it with my wife. I watched it with some friends who aren't big horror people and they enjoyed it. Whereas The Howling might be more for a strictly horror audience.
The Howling definitely, I think tonally, I'd have to give it to The Howling because I think it's more consistent tonally and it's more leaning horror.
But I find anytime it starts to build tension, it almost takes itself, having the climax of the film take place in a porno theater and they actually show the cheesy porno dialogue and stuff in the back. It does kind of take away from what would have a lot of gravity. Whereas I did find The Howling did have that darker atmosphere, even like starting in the red light district, being out in like a cabin in the woods and the howling.
Yeah.
And like, I did like, and the isolation, even though the colony as a therapeutic destination is kind of hokey.
Yeah.
I felt like as a setting kind of worked.
Sure. I mean, it allows things to happen for sure.
Yeah. And the silver bullets and the cabin, I did like the tone and the atmosphere more, I think. But if I had to watch one for fun, I would watch American Werewolf.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say for me, like I'm going to give it to The Howling, but I don't necessarily enjoy it more than American Werewolf. I just think if we're going to talk strictly consistency of tone and the tone of a horror film, it definitely is more of a horror film.
Yes.
Tonally.
Yes.
Than American Werewolf.
Yeah, I think so. I like the atmosphere of the slaughtered lamb too. Just that like country pub kind of thing.
That was so good.
It was. And you know that there's something suspicious going on. So I like the way that they build that up. But just that it's subtle, the comedy, I think, in American Werewolf.
Yeah, it's not laugh out loud. Like, I mean, I love the tube scene with that uppity, Englishman.
Yeah.
I shall report you. And he's got this werewolf coming down the hallway at him. And then his friend, Jack, also has some great, I'm not having any fun here.
Yeah.
So
actually going back to practical effects.
Yeah.
The makeup on him when he's, I guess he's
all
a
the
dream or an
corpses. Yeah.
It's vicious and it looks so good.
Yeah.
Because my kids were like kind of walking in, and even though tonally they would be totally fine with it, I was like, no, you do not want to look at the screen right now. So
I don't want to put up with your nightmares for the next month.
Exactly.
So I'd give it to The Howling, that one.
Me too. So 2 points for The Howling on tone, atmosphere, and scares.
There you go.
All right. I'm getting the sense just you seem kind of down on The Howling. Is that?
Well, if I'm comparing the two films,
100%. Do you enjoy the film generally? Or like if we were just doing a review of The Howling, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it many times and I didn't mind going back to rewatch it this time.
Yeah.
But there are things, I think, there are things for me in The Howling that are more dated than in American Werewolf because the comedy and the lightness of the tone, I think, allows you to bump over some of those glitches.
That's a fair point.
That you might focus on more if it's got a more serious tone.
Yeah.
Right. But
all right. Well, moving on to music and sound.
There's no there's no competition here. American Werewolf is absolutely just awesome with music.
It has a banger soundtrack.
Yeah, it's a great soundtrack. And so you've got Blue Moon there's just so many Moon songs. You've got Moon Dance by Van Morrison.
Van Morrison, that was so good.
You've got Bad Moon Rising by CCR.
Yeah.
It's a killer soundtrack. And a thoughtfully killer soundtrack. Like just, again, there's that little bit of tongue in cheek with the music paired with the movie, right? And
the levity of the film kind of comes from the fun pop songs, which all have the moon related lyrics.
Yeah.
It's true. Cause when I had forgotten that about American Werewolf, but watching it, I kept smiling like, oh yeah, this is a banger. This is a banger. Oh, this soundtrack is so good. Whereas like a week after The Howling, I almost struggled to remember what the soundtrack was like. I did go back and listen, but it's just kind of synthy, orchestral, kind of your typical horror fare. I didn't feel like he was doing anything too crazy. Pino Donaggio was the composer.
Okay.
There were times where I liked it, but there was also times where I felt like it was overbearing and kind of detracted. So I agree with you here. I think it's a no-brainer, American Werewolf. I do think the howling sound of a werewolf is important.
Yeah.
And I felt like both of them did a good job.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't some identifiable animal. Like, it was like a tiger or a lion. Like they had a distinct, pretty eerie, unsettling werewolf sound. And I think they both did a good job there.
And I mean, I think it's really good in the beginning of American Werewolf when they're out on the moors and like Jack is, what is that? Like that would freak you out. I mean, having been in 1989, I took a trip to England while I was a student and I had very little money and we did a lot of walking across farmers' fields. And yeah, I can totally imagine that scene at night where it's like, and I mean, again, it's just humor, right? Stick to the oh, damn, we're on the moors. There's just that kind of stuff that make it like it's a buddy film and it's taking something from those buddy films of the old days, like with Bob Hope and it's not Jack Lemmon, but it might be Jack Lemmon. Anyway, they made like On the Road to Honolulu, and there's a bunch of on the road films, these buddy films. So I feel like, part of the emotion in the film comes from that buddy style of comedy, and then they've blended it with something else.
I love when horror films can take pop songs with lyrics that fit and put it in there. So like the Night of the Living Dead remake or Dawn of the Dead remake, the Down with the Sickness.
Yeah.
And they do the Richard Cheese cover of Down with the Sickness. And it's so good and it works so well in a zombie film.
Yeah.
So I think here, All the Moon, that was just really good. And they're great songs like Van Morrison, CCR. So I'm very happy to give music and sound category to American Werewolf.
Fantastic.
All right.
Didn't want to have to fight you on that one.
No. All right, moving on to characters.
Well, again, I really like David Naughton as a. I mean, he hasn't done a ton of great stuff as an actor, I don't think. I'm not really familiar with his filmography, but I remember seeing him in cheesy sitcoms at late 70s, early 80s. I think he does a really good job with this. I think, Griffin Dunn does a really good job. The locals, particularly the one who's kind of angry.
Yeah.
To me, they were all believable. I mean, I had that experience when I was in England. I was in Coventry and I was traveling with a buddy, and we walked into a pub, and it literally the same thing. Everybody stopped and turned and looked at us.
Oh, actually.
And it was terrifying because it's like, what's going to happen next? Anyhow.
And apparently wanted Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi to play these two characters. Oh. The studio was pressuring John Landis to have them from Animal House or Blues Brothers.
Blues Brothers, yeah.
And he's like, no, I want to go with these other people. But that would have been a very different film to have.
Very different. They would have to have made it lean far more into the comedy, I think, for that to work.
Yes.
Whereas these two, like David Naughton and Griffin Dunn, I don't think were huge names at the time. They'd both done work. But I think it was a smarter move to go with two actors that had less of a name than Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of these two being I can't think of another film where I've seen either of these guys.
No, I mean Griffin Dunn I've seen in a few things but more serious work, more dramatic work. David Naughton, I don't even know what I've seen him in, if anything.
I thought Jenny Agutter was very good as Alex.
Yeah.
What did you think of the relationship between David and Alex?
Well, I mean, it's convenient. I mean, I believe it would never happen in real life.
Yeah.
A nurse taking a patient home. I don't think so. I mean, has it happened? Yeah, sure. I'm sure it has somewhere, but I just think it's highly unlikely, especially if you're wondering whether this guy's off his rocker, you wouldn't bring him home.
Yeah. Or I could at least get, cause it's very unique actually to have her basically bringing him home for a hookup.
Yeah.
But then there being anything beyond that in terms at the end where she's like, oh, I love you. Like, no.
Yeah.
Like he's so crazy.
Yeah.
You might enjoy looking at him and sleeping with him for one night. But then when you see what he's up to, you think you'd be terrified.
Yeah,
like you want nothing to do with this guy.
Mommy, a naked American man stole my balloons.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how crazy he is, right? He wakes up in the zoo and steals some kid's balloons to get home.
Yeah. So the romance angle, I feel like falls apart. I do like David's character though. He's like charismatic. He's funny.
Yeah.
I like the scene with the boy at the zoo when he wakes up naked in the wolf pen. He's like asking for his balloons, but he's like, I'm like a balloon thief. Like that was good. I do think one of the weaker aspects of Howling is the characters.
Like her husband
he's lame.
Yeah.
I mean, other than her, I think she's fine.
Yeah, I think Dee Wallace, I mean, generally is underrated. She does some pretty good work in a lot of these horror films, right?
Yeah.
Like Cujo and different things.
But everyone else is kind of a caricature. The investigators are very underdeveloped.
Yeah.
Yeah, her relationship with him is whatever.
Well, and you can really see, I mean, one of the things that jumped out at me when I watched it this time was just kind of the offhanded attitude towards domestic violence. Like he backhands her in one of the scenes, and it's almost like he just yelled at her, right? Like it's just kind of pawned off, and it never really deals with the seriousness. And I think that's a sign of the times, that it was made.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they were trying to highlight that being extreme though, because that was after he'd become a werewolf.
Yeah.
So before he's like a vegetarian, then he's eating meat, and then obviously he strikes her. I think it was supposed to be
for sure
shocking maybe, but you're right. She didn't seem to make that big a deal of it, which is problematic. What do you think of the full moon transformation versus they can just shapeshift at will?
Well, it's just, I don't know that one's better than the other. It's just a different approach to, I kind of like the traditional full moon thing.
Yeah.
The transforming at will is maybe a more advanced look at werewolves, like, because so another difference related to this is like the people in the colony are embracing the fact that they're werewolves. And David just doesn't want to. And his buddy and all the other corpses are like, you should really kill yourself because you're going to commit murders and you're going to do terrible things. So it's just a very different approach to one's accepting and, being able to turn at will. And the other is kind of fighting against it. And then you've got the, traditional full moon thing. So
yeah, because I think it's just that one character who tries to throw himself in the fire at the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe showing a bit of like, I'm done with this potentially.
Is that the older guy, John Carradine?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I think the characters in Howling are pretty flat, pretty one-dimensional. You're not really attached to any of them. And they're there just kind of forward the plot. Like Marcia just being like a nymphomaniac and
yeah, exactly. And even the peripheral characters, I think in like the Dr. Hirsch, I feel like he does a good job, and that's almost believable, right? Like here's a patient, and I create this bond with him, and I'm like, I want to help him. So he kind of goes out of his way to go to the slaughtered lamb and like talk to those, and he can see that there's something weird going on. Yeah. So yeah, David was good. I thought even though Griffin Dunn's Jack character has kind of not as many scenes, I think he's really good. I think the nurse is really good. So and there's a great scene too with the other nurse. I can't remember her name, and she's talking about the Americans being Jewish, and the nurse Price is like, well, how do you know? And she goes, well, I looked.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think I prefer the characters in American Werewolf.
Yeah, they're more developed.
Yeah.
And there's so many in the Howling. Like when they go to the colony, you're just introduced to all these different people, and they don't just have the time to dedicate to making them well-rounded, fleshed out characters. The doctor guy at the end, you get a bit of a turn from him. But yeah, so I think we're both going characters, American Werewolf. Yep. 2 points.
And by the way, I deliberately stayed away from special effects talking about the ending of The Howling, because I'm assuming we're going to talk about it at some point, because that was a major detractor for me.
Oh, interesting. I think we're going to talk about that right now, because our final category for comparison is ending and payoff. Okay, well, that's interesting. So which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, let's do The Howling.
Okay. So what, you don't like the ending?
She's an Ewok. She's not a friggin' werewolf.
Okay. She does look like an Ewok.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The concept, I was totally on board. Like, okay, nobody's going to believe us unless we show them. Okay. And then you come out with this cutesy little, that really bugged me.
Okay.
Every time I see it, I'm like, come on.
Now, should that count against ending payoff, or should that count against special effects?
No, it should count against, because that's at the very end. How are you going to tell people, or how are you going to get people on board that there's some terrifying werewolf cult out there and you look like a teddy bear? It's like, no, that has to count against the end.
Okay, that's interesting, because like conceptually, I much prefer the ending of The Howling. That aside, so if I did notice it, but I guess it didn't bother me, but maybe it should have. I was like, oh, that's a weird looking werewolf. It does look like an Ewok. But I found the ending a lot more interesting. It felt like there was more of a climax, I think, at the colony. Some of the tension around the showdown between Chris and Eddie, and then Eddie not knowing that he had the silver bullet, and he gets him with the silver bullets. That was really good. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Do you know Robert Picardo from Different Things? No. Okay. He's
which character does he play?
Well, he's Eddie.
Oh, okay.
And I saw his name in the credits, and I was looking for him, and I couldn't really ever find him. But he is Eddie, but the makeup was just so extreme.
Oh, okay. And then in the beginning, you don't see him because he's in the dark, right? When she meets him in the theater. Yeah. Okay.
He's the doctor on Star Trek Voyager. So.
Okay.
He is in a lot of stuff, but never a major role. Like he's usually a minor role, but I expected to recognize him because I watched a lot of Voyager back in the day.
Okay.
And I didn't even realize that until the credits at the end. Like, oh, that was him, but it didn't look like him. Anyways, yeah, so I thought the climax was a little more interesting for the Howling. And I kind of like the idea that she's going to go on the news and transform for everybody to see.
Yeah.
But then the idea that even when people can see something happen, they still doubt.
Yeah.
Which is still so relevant today, I feel like, as it was back then, even more so today, probably. So just the idea that everything is a conspiracy, and even when people see something that should be obvious,
well, it could just be special effects on TV, right?
Yeah, like I thought that was a good line. And then the final twist of having Marsha in as one of the ones who survived in the bar, I kind of like that as like the final thing.
Sure. And I mean, you were mentioning, because there is a series of Howling films. I haven't seen any of the follow-up films.
No, me neither.
I've heard they're all bad. So
I wonder. I think she maybe shows up again in a future
I think
one.
that's what I was going to say. I think they use that character to further the story. I mean, and again, I feel similarly in the sense that I liked the concept of the ending of the Howling.
Yeah,
it definitely was generally more suspenseful than you kind of American Werewolf kind of broadcasts long before the ending what's going to happen at the end. And it's kind of anticlimactic because, he turns, he does a crazy, but I have to say the finale in Piccadilly Circus is absolutely bonkers.
It's pretty nuts.
And I love that because there's like people being run over and cars going through buildings. And I just think it's a really great job. So for me, the excitement of that finale was really good. And the detracting of the Ewok was,
the Ewok.
So I have to give it to American Werewolf for that one.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I would go Howling here. I think, not to get political, too political.
but you are.
But this idea of like people seeing something on the news and then having their own take immediately. So I remember when the assassination attempt on Trump, it had been like 10 minutes and already like my left-leaning friends were saying, oh, it was like a setup and Trump's trying to like look good. So they faked him being shot in the ear and it was all orchestrated by his side. And then the right-wing people are saying, oh no, it was like the FBI and Joe Biden trying to assassinate him. And like, well, maybe it's just this 18-year-old kid who wants his like moment of fame. And but everyone is so quick to jump to
absolutely, yeah.
And they can't take what they're seeing at face value. So to me, this idea that we see this woman transform into an Ewok on the news, and then everyone's like, oh, special effects are good these days. And then they just kind of brush it off. I thought I liked the commentary there.
Yeah, and I do too. And the part of what I did like about the Howling was the media element and those kinds of messages. But I mean, Marsha's werewolf even would have like that was more werewolf when she transforms.
Oh, totally.
Like if that was what was happening at the end, I think they would have stuck the landing.
It's kind of a fair point because that arguably is the most important transformation of the film. So it might have made sense to invest all your resources into that transformation and maybe cut corners on some of the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, the Eddie one is kind of important because he's like the serial killer. But I get that there was a lot of, I guess maybe they went chronologically because it sounded like at the end of the film is when they ran out of money.
Okay.
And so their last few transformations obviously did not look as good as the first few. But I found the American Werewolf ending, though fun. I did find that the whole porno theater thing kind of took away the tension of it. So it just ended up being kind of a fun, chaotic ending.
Sure. But
there wasn't much gravity to it. It just, oh, there's a bunch of people getting mowed over by cars. And then it's just, they shoot them and then it's over.
Yeah.
Like it's very abrupt. I like that it's not a happy ending. I like that neither of them are happy ending.
Yeah.
The bleakness of them.
And I mean, I think, coming back to the tonal differences in the movies, I think the ending of American Werewolf, is true to the tonal balance they try to do all the way through the film with horror and comedy, black comedy, because that whole finale scene, I mean, that's basically black comedy.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it's so over the top.
It's totally over the top. And I think, okay, so here's maybe something to consider. I think if they had played the ending straight in American Werewolf, I don't think it would have worked. It would have come across as schmaltzy, I think, because like you mentioned, well, how is she in love with this guy that she's known, for a week or something? So I feel like if they had gone serious at the end and the rest of the film had remained, that wouldn't have come off as an ending for me because it would have brought it like almost to a halt with a serious ending.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of just said, well, damn the torpedoes, and we're just going to keep going.
Do you think her crying though, like, I love you, David, and like that was kind of schmaltzy?
Yeah, it's pretty cheesy.
Yeah. So I felt like that maybe the combination of the chaos and the car accidents and the porn theater and then her like mourning his dead body maybe was a bit odd, that juxtaposition.
I mean, I did like the idea because
she was a really good actress. It's not against her.
No, not at all. But I do like the idea as in sort of old school werewolf films. There was an appeal to try to get to the human underneath and try to connect emotionally with there's still a human in there. And this has happened in, like Jekyll and Hyde kind of films or those transformational kind of roles. So I did like that element, but I agree with you that, that's a bit cheesy at the end when she's, mourning somebody she's known for a couple of days.
Mm-hmm. But I think one of the strengths of American Werewolf in London is it's so tonally unique.
Yeah.
Because you have essentially like a comedy director doing a horror film, which you don't see very often. He brings a different energy to it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of refreshing. Whereas like The Howling kind of blends in with almost any other horror film that you would see tonally. Like it's not that unique.
Did you, I didn't get to this point I wanted to do a little bit more looking into John Landis, but did you hear anything about anything weird like happening in the film? Because I don't know, do you know the story behind Twilight Zone?
No.
So, there was an actor that was killed. Vic Morrow was killed on Twilight Zone.
Okay.
Because Landis kept wanting to get this shot of this helicopter, and the stunt guys knew that it was a dangerous, and so the actor's walking towards the helicopter, and the helicopter is very low to the ground. And it actually touched something, and the blades, and it decapitated him on set.
That's crazy.
And John Landis, I believe.
Now, was Twilight Zone before or after this film?
Before.
Okay. So he went into this film with that already hanging over him?
Yeah,
okay.
And I think he was not brought up on charges, but there was an inquiry around it. And I can only imagine, I'm certainly not suggesting that, he was doing any of this maliciously or on purpose, but I think as a young director, he was kind of going for it and maybe ignoring some of the safety, features. So I just wondered if anything with all that Piccadilly Circus thing, if anything crazy happened.
So you didn't come across anything?
No,
no, I didn't. And I wasn't aware of that. So that's interesting.
There you go.
Funny for like a comedy director. I wouldn't have expected that level of intensity.
Well, Twilight Zone wasn't very funny.
No, that's true. You're right. When you look at his filmography,
yes.
But you're right. There's that, and I think he had one other darker film.
Yeah, because I'm looking at like Coming to America, Trading Places, Blues Brothers, Animal House. Those are all.
It's all comedies. Yeah. So that's interesting that I definitely associate him as a comedy director, and even this is kind of labeled as a black comedy.
Now, I did want to say that the critic consensus for American Werewolf. Terrifying and funny in almost equal measure, Landis's horror comedy crosses genres while introducing Baker's astounding makeup effects.
Absolutely. So if we're going on points, that's 8 points for American Werewolf and 4 points for Howling. So the official winner is, drumroll,
American Werewolf.
American Werewolf in London. And I think that plays out in terms of just pop culture recognition. Like you hear a lot about American Werewolf in London. I had not even really heard about The Howling until we started this season and you recommended it.
I wonder if the subsequent films in the franchise have done it some damage.
That's true.
Because the first one is, to my mind, is quite a good movie and generally holds up pretty well for me anyway. 40 years later, and I didn't have an issue watching it again. I mean, there's, certain niggles, but I think we've talked about this before. I mean, the beauty of somebody my age is that I've seen things really bad over the course of watching movies. So even when I go back to the 80s, it's like, yeah, that's not too bad because I've seen a lot of worse stuff.
To be fair, I've heard American Werewolf in Paris is really bad.
Oh, I didn't even know there was an American Werewolf in Paris.
I've heard it's awful. So I think they both have some, granted, I think The Howling has like 8 or 10 follow-ups, but I've heard American Werewolf in Paris is not good. So you've not seen that one, I guess.
I haven't. When was it released? You know?
I'm not sure.
Is it fairly recent or?
No, I think it's shortly after this one was. Yeah, I saw some footage of it at some point. It looked 80s, but yeah. So there you go. Maybe that's something to put on your list. So objectively, so even though in points we give it to American Werewolf, I presume you would also just subjectively give it to American Werewolf in London as well?
Yeah, for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think if I were to watch a film just to be entertained, I would watch American Werewolf in London. Like, it is more refreshing. It's more interesting. It's more entertaining beat to beat. I do kind of like the darker, more horror tone of The Howling in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, if I were to recommend to a horror fan, maybe I'd recommend The Howling more.
Yeah, and just say to, if they were a horror fan, like, watch the transformation scene in American Werewolf, and like, that's really what it's known for.
Yeah. Did you like the look of the werewolf when he is on all fours running around the city at the end? Like, I thought it looked less good in that regard.
Sure. But I mean, I guess maybe I'm more forgiving because I did see it in the 80s, and I kind of know, it doesn't, like I said earlier, it doesn't move as fluidly as a four-legged animal would, but I'm willing to forgive it that. I think just because I do, there's a pretty high nostalgia quotient for this one for me.
Yeah.
Even though
it's telling that it had that effect on you back then, right? Like, that's important.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, similar to, we talked just before we started, like, similar to The Thing in 1982. I mean, that's absolutely out. Even 43 years later, there's very few films that have done what that one has.
Totally.
Regardless of what you think of, the effects of dated or whatever. I still think...
Oh, the practical effects in The Thing are so good. So, and that's Rob Bottin, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Who did the Howling one.
So, yeah.
Now, do you... Because I think American Werewolf in London is so synonymous with that transformation scene.
Yeah.
Is that what drew you to it at the time? Or was it the whole package?
For sure the whole package, because at the time, even though I would have seen this after the Academy Awards and he'd won all that, I wasn't clued into any of that stuff when I was a younger viewer. So all of that would have gone over my head. There was just a buzz about the film. And the fact that it was restricted means I couldn't see it in the theater.
Right.
So, this is obviously way before your time, but we had a VCR. I convinced my dad, this is one thing I convinced my dad to do. He wanted to get a beta machine because they were more popular.
Oh, yeah.
And I convinced him, no, go VHS.
Oh, well done.
And I was correct. But
because beta was it a little bit higher quality?
Yeah, but smaller tapes and smaller machines.
And that was the battle, right? VHS went out, obviously, in the end.
And anyway, so the reason I remember this one quite vividly is because a buddy and I rented a Laserdisc player, which is basically almost like a vinyl LP, but it was a little bit bigger than that. And you had this like really weird machine that you put it in, and it was better quality than a VHS. But I remember we paid something like $100 for 10 films and the machine for a weekend.
Wow.
Which means...
And that was in, like, accounting for inflation, that's a lot.
That would have been in the, like, 83-ish, 84. Yeah, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we watched a lot of movies. Like, I was bleary-eyed at the end of that weekend.
That's cool.
But yeah, it was a ton of fun. And that's why I remember this one, because we rented it on Laserdisc. And and it was just, there was a real, I could rent that one as a 16-year-old, but I couldn't have gone to see it in the theater.
So at that time, would you have seen it as a horror film rather than the comedy maybe would have?
So I don't think some of the comedic elements were lost on me. I mean, there's obviously some things that were that I got, but there were other little things that maybe I didn't get. But like I said, I found that scene in his nightmare particularly disturbing when I was young. That whatever those things were, the Nazi things.
Nazi werewolves, yeah.
Because it's just so.
Well, they're holding him at knife point.
That's right.
It's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
And the way, it's almost funny, but it was so horrific. Like, they shoot and the people are just like thrown back,
well, the gore on Jack,
yes,
in all the whatever they are dream sequences, it's really good.
Yeah.
It's just his whole neck is shredded, and it looks still good today. Like, practicals are so much better. Yeah, hopefully 2025 can produce and beyond some more good werewolf films. I do like the werewolf subgenre.
Me too.
And I'm always a bit disappointed. Werewolves Within was fun.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one was really fun because they really leaned into the comedy of that one, and they had enough special effects to keep you interested.
Yeah.
But it was more about the comedy.
Dog Soldiers is one that keeps coming up.
Yes, I've seen that one.
See, I've not seen that one. Is that?
Oh yeah, I'd watch that one.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Because obviously this one, The Howling, is it Jack Nicholson? What's that one? Wolf?
Yes, Wolf. Yeah.
I seem to recall I liked that as a kid, but okay, it's been a while.
Isn't there one with Benicio del Toro?
Yes.
I think it's similar.
Yes.
Maybe Wolf or Wolfman.
I've seen that one as a kid too. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, I don't think it was very good either.
So I don't know why directors, like, they're all over zombies, all over vampires, all over like ghosts and haunting and demonic possession, but The Cursed or something last year, 2022. There's one other werewolf one, The Curse or Cursed or something.
Oh, I don't think I saw that one.
Okay. But yeah, anyways, the moral of the story is we need more werewolf films.
Yeah, and I wonder what that's
Good
about
ones.
because I think when you set the bar so high 40 plus years ago, unless you're going to blow your budget on an amazing transformation
That's
scene,
true.
like zombies you can do with makeup, like ripped clothes and stuff. Vampires you can do pretty easily. Ghosts or, whatever. But werewolves, like, you've got to commit if you want it to be a good film, I think.
And I wonder if American Werewolf in London has almost scared off other people from wanting to do it because they do it so good here. Any transformation, you're always being compared to American Werewolf in London. And
100%.
so that's going to be hard to beat. Yeah, actually, that makes some sense to me. So I appreciate Leatherface has offered to go back and watch Howling 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 for next episode to give us a thought on the franchise.
For sure. Yeah.
I appreciate you
what
doing
I'll
that.
spend my entire week doing. That's this week.
Excellent. But I committed to watching American Werewolf in Paris. So
there you go.
I'll watch Paris. You watch the other 7 Howling films and we'll do a comparison.
Now, I'd just like to point out, not of course that these are the be all and end all, but the IMDb for Howling was 6.5 and it was 7.5 for American Werewolf. And Rotten Tomatoes was 74 and 60 for The Howling.
Yeah.
And it was 89 and 85 for American Werewolf.
Yeah, there's no doubt that, though I was representing The Howling in some cases, I think American Werewolf is the more important, the more significant, ultimately the better film. But the fun thing about doing the more granular comparisons is you're not just looking at the whole, like individual components. There are some areas maybe where The Howling does some things better.
For sure.
But in totality, American Werewolf it's the most significant werewolf film of all time.
I would agree. You might say that the originals, from Universal with Lon Chaney Jr., I think it was, in terms of the history of film, but in terms of a film, I don't know that it's
because the transformation, the effects, you're just not.
Yeah.
I actually have to go back and watch some of those older ones, the Hammer ones.
To me, they stand up, but as we've talked about many, many times, you just have to be willing to suspend your modern eye when you go in and say, okay, these were the limitations of the time. I think even Frankenstein's 1931, I think, and to me, that film holds up. Partly it's Karloff's performance, but they don't rely on anything too crazy.
You're right. I think they do hold up in terms of like character and story, and
story,
like the emotive weight. Just when you're, competing with Rick Baker.
Yeah.
Cool. It's too bad because Invisible Man was so good.
Yes.
That this Wolfman film that just came out should have been like one of the great Wolfman films, I think. And it didn't do that for me.
And I didn't do it for me either, but to give credit where it's due, Lee Whannell had the courage, I guess, the fortitude to kind of take it in a different direction.
He did.
And
same with Visible Man, right? The whole idea that it was like a suit was really
so, he's taking a risk saying, okay, I know what the history of this is, but I don't want to just make another werewolf film. I want to do something just like The Invisible Man. It didn't follow the same premise as the original.
Yeah.
It didn't succeed for me, but I give him credit for trying something different, even though it wasn't successful.
Yep. No, I appreciate that.
Anything else that you didn't? There's a couple of lines I thought, well, the one that stuck out for me when they were going to the colony is like, I hope these people aren't too weird. And it was like, yeah, they are actually really weird. There were some moments in The Howling He's got a sexy mustache, a holdover from the 80s, 70s. Well, I'll get the decade right.
It's funny because when I watched The Howling in totality, I was like, I didn't really like that. It's when I went back to look at individual elements, I started to appreciate it more.
Fair. Yeah.
But you're right. When I watched it, I was like, I didn't really like that movie.
Yeah.
Whereas I did like American Werewolf in totality. But I did start to appreciate certain things about it when I went to go back and look at certain elements. But yeah, it's true. The characters and just the hokey kind of premise. Not premise. The colony thing is weak.
And I'm pretty sure, because I wrote this down, one of the other niggles for me was when her friend from the studio comes out there, not the woman, she gets killed, but the guy.
Yeah.
The police car doesn't start. It's like, that's such a bad trope in horror films. It's like, have I ever gotten into my car and it didn't start? Yeah, but rarely. Like, I've been driving for 40 plus years and that's almost never happened.
That has to be the biggest cliche in film almost.
It's such a weak, like, think of something better to, like, if you need to delay the scene or increase the tension or whatever, do something different besides 100%. The car not starting.
Yeah.
That really,
and he's like a fairly seasoned director, right? So that's a bit surprising.
Yeah. It kind of bugged me.
Well, and we'll be perhaps looking at one of his films later this season as well.
Interesting.
So.
Joe Dante.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you notice the Roger Corman cameo in Howling?
No.
You know Roger Corman. He's
that's not the
producer, director.
The guy in the bookstore?
No, he's the guy in the phone booth. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, no, I didn't know.
So yeah, that's Roger Corman.
Okay.
And I think the connection is, I could be.
So I know the name, but I wouldn't recognize his face.
I could be conflating this, but I think Joe Dante got his start with Roger Corman.
Okay.
Roger Corman's kind of the king of the B movies, like really bad, low budget, quick turnaround time.
Yeah.
He's got a real reputation. And I think he had, if I remember correctly, he had taken on some directing and he had too many things on the go. So he took a chance on a young Joe Dante early in his career. I seem to recall that's what it was. So maybe that was just a shout out to like,
and apparently John Landis has a cameo as well.
In Howling?
Yeah. No, in American Werewolf.
Oh, I missed that.
Apparently in those traffic scenes when they're all, he's one of the people who gets like killed.
Okay.
I don't know if you can really see his face, but apparently he's got one.
So, nice. That's nice. That's
and Nicolas Cage actually has a cameo in.
Does he? Okay.
That's what we need. We need Nicolas Cage to
a werewolf movie.
Save the werewolf subgenre. Yeah. I can see that happening. Actually.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have to have any kind of weird howl because he'd just do it all for you. And he'd eat all kinds of weird things. And
that'd be great. Okay. Yeah. Maybe that'll happen.
I think if you
heard it here first.
Like he's so into indie films, if you just like contact him and say, "Hey, I'm an indie director writer," and
he would embrace.
Oh yeah, I think he would. Yeah. There you go. So there's your opening.
Okay, well, I can't think of a better way to finish this episode than the prospects of a Nicolas Cage werewolf film. All right, so congratulations to American Werewolf takes down the head-to-head battle against The Howling. That's it for this week, and we'll come back with another 80s episode.
Indeed, we will.
Next episode, and see you in the aisles.